Okay, well, welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. And looks like a lot of Boston people, some New York. My name is Michelle Rapp, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Career Strategy in the Office of Alumni Relations. And my role is to put on programs like this. I try to address a variety of career issues and needs for alumni at all stages of their career. I also oversee the NU Source networking platform and also do provide some career coaching to alumni. So, and there'll definitely be room for you to ask questions today. That's important to me that we do that. Let me get started by sharing my slides. And let me let you know some of the topics that I'm addressing today. And I just need a second to catch the people that might still be joining. Okay, great. So some of what we'll look at today is, you might be in a situation where you have lost your job recently, or recently or a while back, or you may be preparing for a job search and wanting to think about how you can be proactive about that. So I'll be talking about preparing if you are experiencing it, how to adjust and think about your initial steps. We'll talk about the kind of mindset and self-care aspect. And then some of these things are really common job searching topics, but my hope is that today you'll hear some things that you're reminded of, some things you want to do differently, some things that you can put into action for yourself. So we'll look at networking, polishing up your LinkedIn profile, resume and interview tips, things about like how to stay productive, how to achieve your goals. And then I'll be encouraging you to take some action steps and to identify some of those today. So I'd like us to start out with a poll to get a feeling of where you're coming from. So let's just launch this. I'm wondering about if you are someone that's lost your job, or you're anticipating it, or you might be coming from some other need around the job search. So you can just select the choice that applies to you. Okay, I think we've got everybody. So it looks like we have 56% that have lost their jobs, 25% that are anticipating that it could happen, and 19% of other reasons for being here. So welcome. In the chat, if you could indicate just something you're hoping I would address today, that would be great. I'd like to know what's on your minds. In the meantime, I will keep going with some of the topics. So for those of you that might be anticipating a possible layoff, I did want to share some recommendations. One is to assess, what's going on in your organization. How are they doing financially? Is there some movement that indicates things are not going well, or that things might be changing that impact your part in the organization? I think we all have a tendency sometimes to not network as much when we have a job. So this is the time to warm up and engage with your network, be involved with professional and alumni events, thinking about groups that you're a part of. And then it's also really great to network outside of your usual groups, so if you're a marketer, try going to an event that might draw a slightly different crowd that you might get some insights from. But certainly working within your own profession, starting to have lunch and coffee and talks with people would be great. Obviously, updating your resume and LinkedIn, getting to look at job listings, get a sense of what's going on out there, what are they looking for, it might help you think about your interests. You can set up search alerts to keep you notified. You may want to just see if you can find out what's typical in your company. If there is a layoff, what are their policies or practices? A friend of mine who's unfortunately been laid off several times from working in certain startups and things has always been telling me about the importance of, removing stuff from your computer that you need for yourself. Because in a layoff situation, you might be locked out of your computer pretty quickly. And during hybrid work, people started to really blur their personal and work information on computers. So, get things that you need, performance reviews. Maybe you want evidence of reports and projects that you worked on. And again, removing personal data that you need that maybe you don't want your employer to see. And obviously assessing your finances. This may be a time to up your savings. Something to check into is if for some reason you've taken a loan from a 401k, there might be rules about when that has to be paid back if you were to be laid off. You may have health spending accounts that you want to use. And I also read that it was common to have 95 days or less to exercise stock options. So again, you're wanting to be aware and prepared. And I see some of these good questions coming in. Yeah, I will get back to those too. So when there is a layoff situation, I think to me, one of the hard things is that it's not on your own timing, right? You may see it coming, you may not see it coming, but unlike a proactive job search where you know what might happen, this can take you by surprise and kind of disrupt your life. So it's really important to pause, take some time to breathe, to relax, or just process. What does this mean? Journal if you like to journal. Try to capture what is it that I'm feeling right now. Sometimes people feel angry. There are some people where sometimes they've been wanting to make a change. There can be some positives, but it is change. And I find that some people can just feel this urgency to push themselves into job searching, but they're angry or they're kind of distraught. And it may not, I think you can start the process, but just know, like, if you're not, you need some time to recover. And this may be ongoing. And there are losses. You are losing your routine, your schedule. If you were enjoying your work, you are losing that relationship to it. You may not have the same relationships with people, although you can certainly be in contact with them. And I think the US culture is very much about identifying with your job or your company. So that can really feel weird not to have that. So self-care, doing things to take care of yourself, exercise is so important. And also finding support, talking to other people. You may have other colleagues that were laid off with you. So sometimes people do get together periodically with them, or sometimes people create like a job search group together. So those are just some ideas there. Something that's really helpful to understand kind of the emotional experience that people can go through was developed by this guy named Bill Bridges, and I indicated his book there called Transitions. But he talks about transition as having these three phases. So one is an ending, like you lost your job. So there is like an adjustment, a letting go process. There can actually be grief. You may still feel very invested in your work or your projects or the organization. So that's one thing. And then as you go through that, you start to then enter this thing that he calls the neutral zone. And this is a place that many people find uncomfortable, kind of unpleasant, where it's like you're a little bit in limbo. You don't know what's happening, and you don't know how long you're going to be in limbo. You don't know how long will it take me to start a new job or find that new job. So the neutral zone can be uncomfortable, different emotions there, uncertainty. Some people might like it, but it can be undefined. And then eventually the new beginnings, something starts to take shape, and that may have a little more excitement to it. But something starts to develop, you have a new job, you're beginning to work into that identity, and then you're in a new place. So I find it's helpful to just think about, what this might be like. I think sometimes people are so focused on, I have to find a job, that they're not thinking about the emotional side of this. And feel free to pop questions as I'm talking into the chat so that I can address those too. So some basics, if you've been notified that you are being laid off. Many companies do offer some amount of severance pay. My experience has been that it's often 1 to 2 weeks per year that you've worked there. But a key thing is whatever they're providing you and telling you, don't feel like you have to sign anything. There's usually like a 30-day time period that you have to sign the severance agreement, but don't sign anything immediately till you've reviewed it and consulted with other people. Some companies do offer the services of an outplacement firm, which provides either career counseling and or some job search workshops and resources. If they're not offering that, I would still ask for it. Sometimes there are things that you can negotiate. Sometimes it depends. If it's a group layoff, they may be treating everybody the same. It can depend on your level in the organization as well as to what's being offered. And sometimes employers are being concerned and careful about discrimination concerns. If they're laying off people from a protected group, which also includes people over the age of 40, they may be trying to be careful that what their actions are don't imply a discrimination. When you're eligible, it's a good time to apply for unemployment. Again, assessing your financial situation and making a plan and figuring out health insurance. Many employers do offer COBRA, where you can pay to extend your own health insurance that you've had, and you may need to look into other options. So I think a big thing for when you've been laid off is the lack of structure, unless you're someone who likes lack of structure. But for many people, work creates a routine and a way of spending your time. And so my advice is to assess, like, how much structure do you need? What's going to feel right to you so that you don't feel lost? It can be helpful. I know when I was in a in-between job situation, I picked some classes at the gym that I wanted to go to, and they were morning classes. So that got me up and out with a goal. You may want to create some schedule for yourself. Getting together with people is also, I think, really good for connection, but it also adds some structure to your day to meet for coffee, meet for lunch. Maybe you're going to a job seekers group. Some people like to set daily goals or weekly goals. So you need to see what's good for you. It's recommended to kind of get dressed, don't hang out in your pajamas, but like to feel like you don't have to wear work clothes, but dress in a way that's going to energize you. And then get out of the house. You may explore co-working spaces that might add that structure or the sense of an office. Some might like to work at the library or a cafe. Again, what works for you. And volunteer work is really helpful in a time like this. I think it lets you use your skills. It lets you see yourself in a new situation and see what you're offering. It leads to other networks, and it helps you. It may give you some ideas that you hadn't considered. There's also the idea of having a side hustle, of a side business. again, those things give you a sense of control. They might be fun and they can have income. And it's that opportunity. Maybe it's something that you've wanted to do that you have a little extra time for now. Again, trying to keep what's considered like a growth mindset. So there's this idea that a change can be a crisis or an opportunity. So I really encourage you to think about what are the opportunities right now. I will tell you that for many people that I've provided career counseling to, that I guess when I actually talk to people about their layoffs, there are many people where they were like thinking of making a change. They had actually been in a job search, or they felt like it was time for a change and they needed kind of a push for that. So, there may be things maybe you wanted to shift what you're doing. Maybe you want a different commute or work-life balance, less stress. So there are some opportunities right now. You may want support, like joining a job search or networking group. Those can really add structure. You might find someone else who's in a job search where you're become accountability partners to each other, where you meet on a regular basis and set goals and follow up. And you may want to work with a career coach as well. And exercise and having fun and doing things you enjoy is important as well to maintain a good attitude. Be curious, try to be open to things, read about things that interest you. Sometimes reading like a business journal, like Boston has the Boston Business Journal. I know they exist in other cities as well. I like Fast Company magazine. So things that give you ideas like, oh, here's something that's going on in this industry or this organization that I might want to check out. Be mindful of negative things in the news that can affect you. So, you may not want to read about you may want to be informed about where layoffs are happening, but just be mindful of not having it create more fear for yourself that like, oh, there's going to be no jobs. I don't think that's helpful. I definitely recommend considering contract work or temp work. That can be a way to get into an organization that interests you, keep going with your skills, and developing new contacts. The only consideration there is just to make sure you have enough time for your job search as well. You want to be thinking about your personal brand, like what is it that you're really good at? How is it that you have an impact? So one idea is to just ask people you've worked with. When you saw me at my best, what was I doing? You can answer that question yourself too. Think about what impact did I have, but really getting other people's input is helpful too. You were always the person that challenged our group to think differently. You might notice, what did you bring to a team meeting? What did you get feedback for? And asking people too, what strengths did you notice about me? So there may be things that are not really part of your job description that you naturally do and that people appreciate. This is also a time to self-assess. When you think about your different jobs, and I encourage you to write down like examples of projects that you really enjoyed, jobs that what did you enjoy at a particular job, just to really zero in on the parts you like. Think about what would you like to learn in your next job? Like maybe it's a software, maybe it's being a supervisor or a manager. What would you like to learn? What would you like more of or less of? Less administrative tasks, more committee work, more collaboration, more time at my desk, less time at my desk. And do think about, what would you do differently in your next job? Are there some things that you didn't handle well recently? are there some things you need to work on, and how might you go about that for growth, for changing some aspects of yourself? Think about what works for you about culture of an organization. Are they working hybrid, remote, full-time in the office? Thinking about organizational size that you like. You know, some people have worked in startups and they realize like it's kind of chaotic and they keep getting laid off or something like that. Or for other people, it's the only place they want to be. You know, one thing I was thinking about when I was reading about layoffs from the big tech companies is, you know, I wonder for people that are working for those firms, is it time to, do you feel open to considering other organizations besides the big name companies? And really the question is, what's out there? It's at least something to investigate. I think of it as diversifying your job search portfolio. You know, in your finances, you don't want to only have large companies. You want to have international, you want to have small and medium-sized companies. So it's something to consider. And the current situation may be an opportunity to think about, do you want to make some sort of shift? So sometimes people like to change the industry that they work in, go from nonprofit to corporate, or that they want to stay in their industry but change the role somehow. And that might be a big shift or a smaller shift. Maybe you want to switch from marketing to HR, for example. So it can be a great opportunity to make a change. And then, do you need to upskill? What new skills do you need? You may get this a lot from the job listings that you're looking at. So that's something to notice. Again, is it a certain software, or is it, sometimes people have to assess, do I need like a certificate in something? Do I need a full-blown master's? So what new skills? And sometimes it's assessing like, what's the best approach? You know, is this certificate program in project management well regarded, or do I need to do something different? And again, thinking about what would be fun for you in your work life. So I want to take a look at some of the questions that you're asking. Yes, so one thing is definitely being whether you're in tech or HR. I think there's concern, obviously, about will there be opportunities? Because there are so many people on the market. And I'm coming to the networking slide here. I mean, one is you'll see about job listings, but I'm always a fan of the networking part. So there's the things that we're reading in the paper. You may know about colleagues that are also laid off. I think as a job seeker, you're really always trying to understand what is going on out there. And you're always looking for what are needs that exist that I can fill. So one aspect is being out there, talking to different people about trends that they're seeing in your field, what other people see as growing or shrinking. And I think those opportunities to talk to people is way more satisfying than applying for a job and waiting to hear. Of course, you want to do both. But I do think talking to people presents ideas. You're then tapping into their networks, you know, and it's a chance for you to be helpful to other people, to share back and forth what you know. It can also be where meetup groups or professional groups in your field is a way to keep a pulse on what's going on out there. But I think, you know, trying to see if you can gather specific information, you know, even like Caroline mentioned HR, you know, there's different aspects of HR. So maybe it's shifting into a different aspect within HR, human resources, that is also a fit for you, where there might be greater needs. And this can be where someone once suggested to me, like, why do you want to just go to a career counselors meeting where you're hanging out with other career counselors? Go to something different. So it is true, like if you go to a marketing association meeting, there will be job seekers in marketing. So you think about, what else you might attend. A lot of times, like the city newspaper will indicate groups. There'll be a calendar of events for professionals, so you can see other groups that are meeting. You can think about your friends or colleagues, like what groups do they participate in that you might want to check out. And again, finding the companies. The other thing about reading business news from different sources is, there's a lot of times where there'll be a story about so-and-so is closing their office in this location, or they're opening an office, or you just want to read about the trends. Like, I feel like in Boston, I'm always seeing things about the biotech industry and things that are happening, new developments. So I think a time like this can take more creativity and more creative thinking about opportunities. Does anyone else want to add to the chat about how they are approaching these questions of, well, where should you apply? Will there be openings? If you have other ideas about how you're doing this, please throw it into the chat. So this idea of spending a lot of your job search time, like 70 to 80% on networking, is important. And it tends to be more fruitful, more satisfying. And I'm not recommending it. I think there's a common misconception that sometimes people will call their contacts and say, do you know of any job openings? And I think of that as a yes/no question. Like, even people contact me and they say, do you know of openings at Northeastern? And a lot of times I only know of openings in my office or some of my colleagues' offices. And so I feel like it's a yes/no. And sometimes I'll say I don't. Of course, I'm going to offer other help. But I think it's where it's helpful to pick people in organizations that interest you to more talk to about trends, what they're seeing, because the question of openings will come up in that conversation, but it allows for a broader conversation. So it's more of an informational interview. It's not just asking about openings. And I threw in the link here. If you go to Northeastern's university page on LinkedIn, you can do your searches from there. So the searches you're dealing with, just pull up Northeastern alums. Thanks, Alexis. Yes. So you have the option in your settings on your profile with LinkedIn to put an open to work message that recruiters see on LinkedIn. So I definitely recommend doing that. Thank you. Yes, and speaking to recruiters, Amr, you've mentioned that, they do have a pulse on what's going on, what they're seeing, and that they're offering another perspective. And I did speak with someone yesterday who was laid off in a sales role, and he said, some of the recruiters he was speaking with, even though they didn't have some current openings, it put himself on the radar with them. So that was helpful. And when you are meeting with people, it's great to say, does anyone else come to mind that you'd recommend speaking with? You can ask them, what are organizations that you think are doing good work that I might want to consider? And then, so we have this networking platform, nusource.northeastern.edu. And that is both for alumni to alumni connections and for student to alumni connections. So you're welcome to join that. It has the advantage that you can just directly message people on the platform. There are some people that are up there, not so active, but I do encourage you, new people are joining every day. I think we have about 7,000 alums on the platform. Any questions about the networking side of things? Okay. Again, just other things, invite former colleagues to lunch. Even just, the other thing is, just your personal networks. It could be your gym, some athletic activities, your church, if you have kids, it can be the other parents. All these people, your hairdressers are often cited as, or bartenders, they know a lot of people. But having lunch, coffee, inviting people to an event, even doing a virtual call. I know someone who likes to just every week set up virtual calls for a half an hour before her workday. The alumni office, we're putting on lots of events all the time. So looking at our website and making sure we have your current email address so you're getting notified about upcoming events. And Meetup, meetup.com has some professional groups there as well. And then keeping in mind your family, your social networks. Also that people want to help. People like talking about themselves, they like sharing information, and a lot of informational interviews and networking is a two-way street because people might be really interested in your work experience and your knowledge and networks. So always look for that opportunity to give back to others as well. Okay, some tips on LinkedIn. I think a key thing is revisiting your LinkedIn so that it's speaking to the direction you want to go now. LinkedIn is hard because you only get one identity there. Sometimes we're pursuing multiple interests, but you're trying to fit it into one profile. I do recommend having a summary on LinkedIn and your resume. I'll share a sample in a minute. Now, the good news on LinkedIn is you have more space to work with than on a resume, but you're always dealing with short attention spans. So you still want to keep it brief, but you have a little more flexibility there. A lot of people feel a little stumped about summaries. And my favorite thing about LinkedIn is that you can look at lots of other people's profiles, especially of people in your field, and copy ideas. I'm all in favor of that. It's kind of like looking at other resumes and seeing what you like. This one is from Ronnie Wise, who's a Northeastern alum. She actually has her own marketing business, but she demonstrates, a good photo, thinking about her background, a little different because she is in her own business. You may have also noticed that there's this trend towards, it used to be that you would put your job title under your name, but now it's more your skill set or the areas that you work in. So it's kind of a branding and marketing, but it's not tied to your particular job title. So that's a good thing to update. And for both LinkedIn and your resume, you want your bullets to be about accomplishments as much as possible. So showing how you had an impact, things you initiated, fixed, improved, increased, or decreased in your role. If you have numbers, that's great. Sometimes people have dollars, percentages, things like that. Always good with your resume and your LinkedIn just to get, just to get feedback from other people. What are they seeing? Are they seeing the message that you're trying to convey? The other thing is to edit out irrelevant items. So we all get attached to maybe some early jobs on our resume. Generally, things that are earlier start to become briefer. And there is a trend now about how far back to go. It might be 12 years, it might be 15 years, but you don't have to go back to a very early job. And Valeria, you are making an important point about, like in the consulting field, sometimes people can't speak about their clients or the numbers and dollars they might be dealing with. The key thing too is again, great to have numbers, but if you can't or don't, you can say significantly increased or saved company, significant money. So, right, you have to do your best with that. But I think even with clients, you might indicate, I've seen people say a Fortune 100 company, a Fortune 500 company in the automotive industry. So as much as you can allude to that, the better. But it is difficult, and hopefully people in your industry understand the limitations. I think another positive thing on LinkedIn is the ability to post your own content and ideas to the general feed, and to also, you might be part of groups in your field where you can post content. So I was, for example, interested in this topic of the future of work, and I made some effort. I wanted to do it weekly. I didn't quite do that, but posting things on that topic because I was interested in it and thinking it might be a future direction for myself. So I think that kind of posting of content keeps people aware that you're out there. And LinkedIn is good too, because people are sometimes announcing their new jobs or that they've left a job, which gives you some of that market information. Or it's also just a good opportunity to reach out to someone. Oh, congratulations on your new job. Why don't we grab lunch when you can? So your resume, a summary, not everybody needs a summary at the start of their resume. What it's good for is, if you're a few years out in your field, it may not be necessary. It's very helpful if you're shifting direction. So it's a short, and I'll give you an example. It's a short statement of your strengths related to what you want to do, not what you have, not only what you've done, but it's in the direction of where you're headed. If you've been someone that's had a diverse background, you've had lots of different jobs, I think it can be a great way to tie things together. And I see it as guiding the reader, like, this is what I want you to see about my knowledge, skills, and experience. So again, keeping it brief. With your resume, you do want to be targeted in the fields that you're looking at. I don't necessarily feel like you have to customize every single resume. What you may find is, let's say you're looking for, 3 different types of roles in general. You could change those resumes and then have 3 different versions that you can use depending on the position. But again, you don't have to list everything that you've done. You can trim out stuff that's less relevant. Keywords are a thing because employers are using these scanners that are really determining how resumes get seen. So you might think about, if you were looking for someone in your field, what are some of the keywords you would use? Sometimes it's certain skills or software. The site job scan that I listed here is one that will take a job description and your resume and give you some feedback about how well you're hitting keywords. Also, always look at the job description. So you really want to see what's emphasized in the job description and make sure you're addressing that. You always want your format to be easy to read, not dense text, not tiny text, not some funky font that's hard to read, not very busy looking. And if you are a career changer, you're going to emphasize your transferable skills that are relevant to the new field. You're trying to get people to see that connection. And those transferable skills should also be in your summary. Using an infographic in your resume. I think the big question would be to investigate how those things are handled by these these applicants tracking systems and scanning, because it may not go well in there. but it could also be something to bring to an interview if or share in an interview too. But there may be a way to do that. Also on your resume, so one of the questions that employers can ask you is, what have you been doing during this time? Like if there's this period where you're not working. So I think it can be helpful, one, to have an answer to that question, but also like having a professional development section on your resume can be a place to show seminars, webinars, or events or conferences that you've been attending during this time. So it shows your engagement with your profession. Also, volunteer work. Some of these things are optional, so it's discretionary, but I find that sometimes volunteer work shows another side of you, or maybe you are a performer in community theater, or athletic things, often, running the marathon, the Boston Marathon can be a point of conversation, as well as, being like an athlete during college, certain things that you did. So sometimes it helps you be more memorable. Oh, talked to an alum who was on the Northeastern hockey team. Oh, that was the guy who was on the hockey team. Or even certain volunteer organizations have sometimes made a point of connection when I'm talking with people. Any other resume questions? Okay, just take a minute here. These are two different summary statements. One is more just the short, it's kind of a long sentence, but you could have a couple of sentences. The longer one, I often like bulleting out some key things. I think bullets are easier to read than a paragraph. So this second one, person indicates like having worked in startups and Fortune 500 industries. The key thing here is stay away from things that are really general. If it's not like personality traits like reliable, team player, those are just kind of generic. So like in the second one, this person's really indicating some specific things that they do and have expertise in. And sometimes people have kind of a long list of these bulleted skills. And again, I was looking at the sales resume, and there were just some obvious things that seem generic to that job, like prospecting or building relationships, but make it more specific. That makes a stronger impression. Another thing you can do, yes, Caitlin, thank you. The big question of 1-page versus 2-page resumes. My personal theory is around the time that you turn 30, it starts to get hard to keep it on 1 page. Certainly there are some little tricks of, margins, fonts, you want to kind of stay in the 10 or 11 point font range. Again, not too dense. Check for relevance, but there does come a time where it's really fine to have a second page. You don't need to fill the whole second page, but you also just don't want like that little bit bouncing to the second page. So, but it is something to do. And I think really with these applicant tracking systems, it's less of an issue as well. So it's discretion, but it's more important to convey your skills and accomplishments than to drop things to keep it on 1 page. Another thing you can do in the job search is try to, consider, are there some companies that I'm particularly interested in? So if those exist, try to find people to talk with in those companies to learn more, maybe people in your role or higher at those companies, but to understand like what are their concerns, what are their priorities, what's it like to work there. Again, diversifying, your portfolio of types or size of companies. You can follow them on LinkedIn. You can keep set alerts to be reading about them, reading articles. And the other thing for your overall job search is just having your own tracking system. It could be a spreadsheet. I think there's some apps out there for it. Particularly if you're tweaking your resume, or you'll save your files, but you want to know which version of your resume you sent to that employer. Also, if you've done some follow-up after interviews, if it's email, you'll have that record, but if it's a phone call, you could track that as well. And follow-up is fine. And in some fields like sales, they're going to want to see someone who persists. The key thing, as you probably know, is just not to be a stalker of a recruiter or a hiring manager, or not to seem kind of desperate or impatient with that, and to be very respectful of their time. In the interview process, it's great to ask, what's the time frame? So then don't call in a week, call in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So just some interview tips here. A lot is happening online, and so definitely give some thought to what your background looks like. I think these virtual backgrounds are very handy. I sometimes, make sure you're getting a good angle. The advice is to look at the camera when you're talking, minimize distractions. Even I find in my own real life background, there's lights on the ceiling that sometimes end up oddly over my head. So you really want to take a good look, and you can even do that with a friend to see what's your best option. With interviews, you really want to think about your agenda. The interviewer's leading the process, but what are 3 to 5 things you want them to remember about your skills, your accomplishments, and really back those up with specific examples. And your goal is to kind of be aware of that agenda. It's your marketing agenda throughout the interview. So if it goes a bit off course, gently throw those things back into the conversation. And you're probably familiar with behavioral interview questions in which they want to have you talk about an actual situation and how you handled it. So they'd usually begin with, tell me about a time when, or what's an example of when you dealt with an angry customer or made a difficult decision. So because those questions require examples, I really recommend as part of your interview prep that you develop a good 6 to 8 examples. And I know I'm someone that doesn't like to think on my feet. I don't do well with that in the interview process, so I don't like to be surprised. And when you have those examples, a lot of times a question about decision-making is also a question about leadership, and it might reflect teamwork. So you have these things kind of in your pocket, ready to pull out. The framework is to briefly describe the situation you were dealing with, the action that you took, not just we, but kind of, they want to know what you did and what was the positive outcome. So you want to pick something that does have a positive outcome. And then they may ask you more questions about that. And it doesn't need to ramble on. The situation, action, results keeps you focused. Also, going into the interview, you want to come back to what do you bring to the table? What's valuable in your approach? You want to know that. It's kind of, why should we hire you? You should be able to answer that. The other thing is to anticipate objections the employer may have, concerns they may have. Well, you don't exactly have experience with databases. What are you going to say to that? You can even, if you have some concerns that you're not the ideal candidate, more towards the end of an interview, you can ask, so how well do my qualifications fit what you have in mind? And they might say, well, we were hoping for someone with more outreach experience. And that gives you an opportunity to say, well, actually, in this job, I did blah, blah, blah. So it's a sales technique, actually, to help you have a chance to respond to their concerns. Research the company, and then the questions that you ask of them are really important. I like to think of it as being a consultant going into this company and this job, more so the job. It's like, what do you want to know? And there are common questions like opportunities for advancement, what happened to the previous person, what's the culture like? But these questions are an opportunity to distinguish your approach and your way of doing things. You might ask, even just what are some of the challenges in this role? Or you may have questions about how they approach certain projects. So those things can show, can help distinguish you and show your approach. I also, I'm realizing as I talk to people that there may be jobs where you're never going to be able to interview or meet in person. But if you start off with some virtual interviews, if there's the opportunity to meet in person, especially when you have an offer, I really recommend that, because I think it's good to be in a physical space unless it's a remote job, or to really see a future manager's office. Like, are you a messy person and they're a super neat person, or the other way around? Like, things that your intuition can inform whether you're going to work together well. You're just trying to assess. And this doesn't have to happen in the early interviews, but at the point that you have an offer or getting close to it, this item here about asking open-ended questions to try to learn more, that's not obvious. I always like to ask, how are the resources for getting the work done? What's a good day or bad day like here? How does the team come together? How often do you meet? So you're trying to assess things that you care about, and things that are indicators to you of a good or bad situation. So a lot going on, obviously, with the interview process. This one is a little repetitive. I guess the one thing here, again, to consider developing new skills through classes and seminars, and putting those on your resume. And then assessing, am I staying on track? Am I getting discouraged? What do I need to do to keep moving forward in this process? So you want to assess what's working or not working, get help. Maybe you want a career coach, schedule time to recharge. Again, doing things you enjoy, managing your stress, exercising. Maybe it's through religious or spiritual activities that you feel connection, or volunteering to be connected to your community. I always feel like if you're pumped up doing things you enjoy doing, that just helps this whole process. In the corner here, I put in this book, Designing Your Life, by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. There's some simple exercises in there and lots of good information about approaching the job search. It's based on applying principles of design thinking to work and job search. So I do recommend that. So I want to see two things we can do here. One is just additional questions. I guess I'm interested in anything that you recommend to each other that we haven't talked about. So feel free, more questions in the chat, other ideas that you want to share in the chat. And as we do that, also jot down a few things that you would like, a few takeaways for yourself from this that you want to put into action. And I also do offer, if you're feeling stuck or needing help in any of these areas, you can reach out to me. My email is there, m.rapp@northeastern.edu. Also, obviously, the Northeastern network is huge, but sometimes, you have your undergrad, if you have an undergrad institution, that can be helpful as well. That's part of your network. Anything else? I do want to mention in 2 weeks at the same time, in March, and I'll send you a message about this. We're going to have a colleague, if you're interested in more of this transition process, and it's not so much about the job search techniques, but it's about kind of navigating the emotion or the experience of this. We're going to have a workshop on that in 2 weeks, and we'll let you know about it. Okay, well, thank you all. Oh, lunch club. Thank you, Julie. Virtual networking, excellent. Any other good networking groups that you found for anyone else that you want to share? Yeah, and there's groups, obviously by profession, then there's some identity-based groups. There's like women engineers and Black MBA, Asian MBA, lots of different ways to slice some of these networking opportunities. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Let me know if I can be helpful as you navigate your own journey there. And please, and Amber is saying industry-based groups on LinkedIn. Thank you. Yeah, so keep seeking these things out, and I wish you well with the process that you're in. Thank you very much.